Hey, welcome to Life in the Leadership Lane. I'm your host, Bruce Waller, where I get to talk to leaders that are making a difference in the workplace and in our communities. What did they do to get started? And what are they doing to stay there? And oh my goodness, here we go. We are in the HR Southwest Conference Spotlight Speaker Series month. And today I'm bringing you another special guest. Today I'm talking to LeAnne Lagasse. LeAnne is she's a keynote speaker. She's a facilitator. She's a consultant, and she does a whole lot to help organizations with LeAnne Lagasse coaching and consulting. And she's one of our 2025 HR Southwest Conference speakers. Hey, LeAnne, good to have you on the show. How you doing?
Hi, Bruce. I'm so great. It's so good to see you. I'm excited to be here.
So we're going to talk HR Southwest today, and we're going to get into your topic. But I always like to start my show with a little reflection on when I met my guests or some of the guests I hadn't met, and they just have come in my path. But for you, we have kind of known each other, but we got to meet in person in Lubbock, Texas, not too long ago when I got a chance to go speak at the Lubbock SHRM meeting, and you're also part of that chapter. Do you remember that meeting? What'd you think about that?
I loved that meeting. I am on the board actually this year for Lubbock SHRM and have really enjoyed that and loved having you there. It was so great. And getting to yours was a 3 hour, was one of
Yes,
our
it
3 hour
was.
workshops, which is I know that takes you gotta keep up the energy for a 3 hour
Yes,
session. And you did
that's
great. It was wonderful to see you and to get to connect a little bit more than what we normally get to, which is just like back and forth on LinkedIn, you know?
yes, exactly, exactly. And of course, I'm big fans of that chapter. Of course, Josh leads the chapter. Keisha's amazing, and so many others. And then also, I got a chance to see you in action at the Oklahoma HR conference, and our good friend Christy Spathy introduced you, and you did a fantastic job. You had a full room. So I think it was like you got like the 7 a.m.
It was
slot.
7 a.m. It was early, but people showed up and I think that speaks to the how important that topic is, which is actually what I'm
Mm,
presenting on at HR Southwest, which is employee listening. And so I was so excited to see you there as well. We had our coffee. It was
with
early, but it was fun.
so much fun. Okay, before we get into that, I would love just for those who don't know you and they don't know LeAnne Lagasse, coaching and consulting, share just a brief highlight of how you serve your customers.
So my background's in higher education. I was a professor at Texas Tech University. Guns up
Guns up.
for, yeah, guns up for 14 years. I taught in the College of Media and Communication. And so my background's in higher ed. And in about 2017, I decided, hey, let's start like a side gig, a side
Mm.
hustle where, I'll get to take a lot of what I'm teaching and training with my students. And I also led a large team of teaching assistants and let's go do this side hustle thing. And I went and did, what I thought was going to be a side hustle, teaching and training and equipping, and with organizations in the Lubbock area initially, and it really took off. And so very quickly, I was kind of faced with a hard reality, an exciting reality. But okay, I've got to pick one of these full-time jobs,
Mm.
that
Yeah.
I have somehow acquired. And I was just loving what I was getting to do, helping organizations with their employee engagement and their retention, and ultimately equipping their leadership and their people
Mm.
managers to drive engagement and retention using a lot of communication centric approaches and theories that, I had learned over the years. So that's what I do.
Mm.
I work with organizations now all over the country. I help them boost their engagement and retention. I do a lot of leadership development and equipping. And it's all centered around this idea of how do we send better messages to our
Mm.
employees, and then how do we receive more robust messages from our employees that can help us, equip us to do a better job creating workplaces where employees thrive. So that's what I get to do. I do a lot
Mm.
of consulting, a lot of teaching and training and equipping, keynotes,
Mm.
and executive coaching. So I do a
Mm.
lot, but it's all designed to help leaders boost engagement and retention.
I love that. And I love how we start something as like a side gig
Yeah.
and it turns into a full-time job. You're like, wait a minute, I just created myself two full-time jobs here and I got to figure out which road I'm going to go down. So, no, you're doing great work. I've got to follow you also on LinkedIn and I get to see some of the comments people are making and it's really, really, really good stuff. Hey, well, I want to just I know you, but there's probably some things I don't know about you. You mentioned have served as a professor at Texas Tech. Talk a little bit about share the LeAnne Lagasse story. Like, where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Lubbock? And then what led you to be a professor?
Yeah. So I was born in Texas, but
Mm,
I was raised in Ruidoso, New Mexico.
mm,
And so I grew up in the mountains and, a little ski resort town and loved that. I moved to Lubbock as a college freshman and I never left. I just
mm,
love it here. I do get to travel a lot and I enjoy that, but Lubbock is home. I am very passionate about this community. I'm very rooted here. I just love the people. I love the college environment. And when I moved to Lubbock, I thought that I was going to. I knew I was good at public speaking. I had
mm.
gotten good feedback about that, in my high school years, and I had some other, leadership positions. And at the time, I was really thinking, I guess if you're good at public speaking, you become a like broadcast journalism major, which is not even called that anymore. It's not called broadcast journalism anymore. But at the time I thought, I guess I'll be a news anchor, which is so funny
Yeah.
because now knowing news anchors, I'm like, I would not have loved that job. But I in the time I thought that's what I was going to do. But what
Mm,
happened was I got to Lubbock, I ended up taking an elective that was in my freshman year. I don't know why I
mm,
just got kind of put in this class, and it was a communication studies class,
mm,
specifically interpersonal communication. And I was alive in that class.
mm,
I mean, I could not get enough of it. I never skipped that class. Okay, let's be real. I
mm,
didn't skip very many classes. I'm kind of a
mm.
rule follower by nature, but like that was the class that I was like, no, I would move heaven and earth to go to this class. I could not get enough of it. I was reading the textbook for fun. I was probably annoying my roommates, like, listen to this research. I just came alive and I never looked back. I decided I changed what I was going to study. I was focusing on communication, so I studied interpersonal and nonverbal and
Mm,
intercultural and gender and organizational communication, and I just could not get enough of it. And really, how I ended up becoming a faculty member was I went to grad school because I just wanted to keep learning. I loved it so much. I was so passionate about it.
mm,
And as a part of that process, I was a graduate teaching assistant. And I say this was a very pivotal moment for me in my life because my mom was an elementary school teacher. I didn't
mm,
really envision myself as a teacher, but I went to grad school and was teaching, some undergraduate classes in public speaking and business and professional. And I remember walking out of the class, one of the classrooms I taught, I'd lectured, and I walked out and I thought, I think I was maybe made to do this. Like I
mm,
just loved it. And I walked out with more energy than when I walked in, getting to teach and train. And I loved teaching so much that when I graduated with my graduate degree, I stayed. I stayed and I was an instructor, and then I worked my way up and I eventually ended up in a very big administrative role where I was over public speaking for all Texas Tech students. So pretty much anybody who took public speaking at Texas Tech during those years took it with
mm,
me. And I had, large lectures. And the other cool part of that job was that I got to work with about 20 to 30 graduate teaching assistants, just like I was,
mm.
back, many moons ago, and help them and teach them and train them. So that's my story. That's how I ended up in higher ed. Was I
Mm.
basically wouldn't leave. I was like, I demand to be here.
I love
I
all
love
of
it here.
that. I love all that. And of course it is a special place. My daughter went to school there, so I got to experience a few years of the Red Raiders in action. I love that. You said something though that and we're going to get into your topic here, but you said something that I just want to dive deeper into, and that is you mentioned pivotal moments and then how you came alive. And when I think about someone that comes alive, I think about, yes, there's probably something that was interesting, but there was probably some people that influenced them along the way. When you came alive, was it just the topic? Was there somebody in particular that just made you, inspired you to want to do that?
I think initially the instructor that I had for that first class I took was phenomenal.
Mm.
Um, I think that what initially grabbed me was just I didn't know people could study this. I didn't know this
Oh.
was a thing. This was what I was thinking about and what I was passionate about all the time. And so it gave me tools and it gave me
Mm,
learning in this area that I was already so interested in. But then when I got into this program, oh my goodness, yes, there were so many mentors and professors that I had
mm,
who really believed in me. One in particular was named is Dr. Patrick Hughes. He's still at Texas Tech. I actually
mm,
got to go very full circle moment. I got to go facilitate a workshop with his team. He's a dean of one of our colleges now, and so I got to go facilitate a workshop for him and his team. I will tell you, I told him too. I was so nervous. I do this all day, every day, and I was just so nervous presenting to him and his team because he just meant the
oh,
world to me. He believed in
love
me.
that.
He really, not that I needed necessarily to be like recruited to grad school
Yeah.
because I was like, I'm not leaving. I love this place so much and I love learning this, but he really empowered me and made me believe that I belonged, and that
Mm,
I had kind of what it took. And so he's one. Another person that I really think about that was very inspiring to me is Dr. David Roach.
mm,
He's still at Texas Tech. He's just incredible leader. But what he taught me how to engage a huge audience.
mm,
And there's nobody better. Like I feel like I could go the rest of my life honing this skill and he would still be just this like he's so good, captivating,
mm,
hilarious, but thoughtful and brought such depth to what he did. And so he really mentored me. And I remember him pulling me aside one day after I had given like a little short lecture in one of the classes, and he told me, he said, "You're really good at this." And that coming from him was just the highest compliment that I could have ever gotten. So he's another one that I think about.
mm,
His encouragement and his belief in me was
mm.
everything.
Okay.
Everything. I think about him all the time.
Now I
Yeah.
know the secret, LeAnne. Whenever I see how great you are, I'm like, oh, she was surrounded by great people. And that's really what it takes. I love all that. Well, let's talk the HR Southwest Conference. It's coming to Fort Worth, Texas, October the 12th through the 14th at the Fort Worth Convention Center. I believe this is the 84th year of the conference, one of the largest conferences in the country. I love it. How many times have you spoken at the conference before?
Yes.
Okay.
So the first year was 2019, and so I
Mm,
presented every year since 20. So what is that? Seven?
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
this will be
Uh,
my seventh year, I
yeah,
think.
okay. Yeah.
Is the math on that? I don't know. I was not reading my math textbooks for fun. I will tell you that much. But yeah, so I even presented in during the pandemic when we were
Yeah.
recording virtually and we did that. So I have been presenting since 2019, and I will tell you, HR Southwest is, and I say this every year, and I mean it. It is my favorite conference,
Mm,
and it means a lot to me professionally because HR Southwest was the first conference that I presented that was outside of kind of the higher ed bubble.
mm,
And so I was so used to presenting at conferences and I was the public speaking professor. That's what I did. And so I was very used to that, but I was very anxious to sort of put myself out there and start applying to speak at HR conferences and,
mm.
kind of talent conferences. And HR Southwest was the first to sort of take a chance on me. I was
I
kind of
love
this,
that.
I was coming in from higher ed. I was starting HR consultant and coaching business, and they took a chance on me, and so it means a lot to me personally. Every year I get to go back to HR Southwest, but I also, and I tell
Mm,
Erin Swain this every time I see her, and and I mean it's been true since the moment I met her, but I speak at a lot of conferences.
mm,
And HR Southwest, from the perspective of them equipping,
mm,
preparing, communicating, organizing for speakers, is, I mean, it's not even a
mm,
close race. I mean, they are phenomenal, and everything, like all the ducks are in a row. And
mm,
I tell Erin every time I see her, that means the world to me as a speaker, to feel seen and valued and communicated to. And so shout out to Erin Swain,
mm.
and her team. I mean, that
Yeah.
takes a lot of people to pull that off. So many people, as you know. But she just has been just phenomenal. I love
It,
her.
oh yeah, she's fantastic. It takes a village. Incredible. They do an incredible job. I want to get into this topic here. You're speaking about mastering stay interviews and focus groups. Let's talk
Yeah.
about that. First of all, the word mastery, I'm like, it's like, man, that just sounds like a lot. But How important are stay interviews? Talk about focus groups. What are you gonna? I don't want you to give away your presentation today, LeAnne, but share a little bit about what you're going to be talking about for those listening and planning on attending.
So I mentioned this at the very beginning of our conversation, but I'm very passionate about the role that employee listening plays in
Mm,
workplace culture. I think, if you look at statistics like the Gallup organization, reports that only 3 in 10 employees believe that their opinions count at work. Three
mm,
in 10, three in
mm,
10. And when I share stats like that, I think leaders can sometimes feel a little bit like, what? Like we do these things. We
mm,
try to do these things. We have really good intentions. And I often say, I don't know any leaders, and not to say there aren't any, but I don't know any that think, how do I create an environment where my employees don't think that they matter? Like,
mm,
no, leaders aren't trying most of the time to send
mm,
that message, but we send that message in what we do, the messages we send, what we do, but also in what we don't do, and the messages that we don't send.
mm,
And so I think that employee listening is such an important piece of the puzzle. And I know so many HR leaders, so many HR professionals that they do care very much about the employee voice, but they don't know, okay, how do we translate that into action? How
mm,
do we send the right messages to employees about how important their feedback is? And so all that to say, most organizations, I think, have some kind of, whether it's like a quantitative survey, an
mm,
employee engagement survey. And I'm actually still a very big fan of that. I know some organizations have moved away from it a little bit, and
mm,
I understand the reasons for that. I am still kind of like, no, I see great value in it. I think it has a place in employee listening strategy. But I think what a lot of organizations do is they get that data back and then they're
mm,
kind of like, we don't really know what to do with that. And we don't
mm,
actually know what it means. So for example, if employees say, hey, communication around here could be better, maybe you score a little bit lower on like
mm,
communication is open or transparent. Well, guess what? That could mean 1,000 different things.
mm,
What the actual root of that problem is or that perception could be 1,000 different things. So quantitative data that you get can be so helpful to help you benchmark. It can be helpful to give you a pulse check on how things are going, to identify some areas where you want to dig in, what's going well. But what I kind of refer to as the qualitative advantage, this is my
mm,
nerd, like research background, professor brain, but like the qualitative data that we can get can give so much context to the
mm,
quantitative data.
mm,
So, in organizations who choose to use state interviews and focus groups, essentially what they're doing is they're saying, hey, we heard you, team members, we heard you
mm,
say this. We heard you say maybe communication's not open, but we want to understand more. We want to deepen our listening posture. We want to
mm,
understand what that means, what ideas you have, what the real barriers are. So, stay interviews and focus groups are tools that you can use to, one, get
mm,
good data back, get more robust, kind of rich feedback. But the other thing that they do is they send a message to your
mm,
team members that their opinions actually do very much matter to you, and that you do want to leverage their strategic ideas and their
mm,
creativity and their problem solving skills. So they're such cool tools,
mm.
and I just want more organizations to feel equipped to use them, because you could start to see all sorts of awesome things happen when you deepen your listening posture.
I love all of this. This is so good and so important. And I was just thinking about a couple of things when I mentioned the word mastering. So it sounds like this is something that, hey, I'm going to give you the tools, but you're going to have to go put it into action. You're going to have to go practice. You're going to have to make sure you're doing the work. And then here's the question I have for you. How does someone know when they're having success? Is it the conversations? Is it the data? What does that look like? If someone were to say, you know what, we're doing a good job in that area, how would they know they're doing a good job?
Oh, such a good question. And the
Mm,
answer is through their employee listening initiatives.
mm,
It's like
mm,
it's a very chicken and egg situation there. But what I would say is the organizations I work with who really start to dig in and want to improve their employee listening. Maybe they did
mm,
have an employee engagement survey of some kind. Maybe they didn't. Maybe
mm,
that's even a first step for them. But they start doing some listening, get some baseline data. This is
Mm.
what kind of, what the vibe is, if you will, from our employees around these different areas. And then we start to ask more questions, more strategic
Mm.
questions. We start to dig in. We start to implement some of the things that we're hearing might improve, communication or whatever it is.
Mm.
And then we're assessing again. We're continuing to listen. What's working? What's not working? So, in my experience, if you do better employee listening, and then you act on what you're hearing. That's an important part, right? Maybe
Mm.
the most important part. Actually, here's another sad stat is according to Gallup, only 8% of employees believe that their leaders take any action on survey results.
Oh.
8%. And this is why I think, using tools like stay interviews and focus groups
Mm.
can help mitigate that a little bit, can help improve that perception because employees are going, oh, so they did the survey
Mm.
and now they're going to do some focus groups
Mm.
about the survey data. They're
Mm.
going to develop an action plan. We're going to implement it. We're going to focus on just maybe two or three things because we
Mm.
can't do everything. We're going to focus on two or three priorities. And look, as
Mm.
it turns out, our feedback resulted in some change. And so the next time we survey, the next time we do, a listening initiative, we almost always see improvements in those areas. Now, the reality is we work with humans, and so
Mm.
there's all new problems emerge. So I'll meet, for example, with some leaders, and we'll be looking at data and comparing it to last year and some of the themes that emerged in some focus groups or stay interviews, and we're like, woohoo! Like we not solved it, but we've really made
Mm.
big strides to close the gap here on this
Yeah.
issue. But oh, there's this other thing that's popping up over here that
Mm.
we got to dig into. And that's
Yeah.
just the nature of leadership. But to answer your question, I think the way that it's working is that you're seeing improvement in those focus areas,
Yeah.
and your employees are actually communicating more to you
Yeah.
because they feel safe to do so.
I love that. It reminds me of my daughter shared a quote on the podcast, and she was talking about the goal is not to be perfect. The goal is just to be better, just to
Yeah.
get a little bit better. And if you can just see that and gain that momentum, continue. You mentioned listening. Whenever I was writing my book, Life in the Leadership Lane, I talked about the power of influence. And one of the things is you got to build trust. And I went out to leaders and I said, hey, how do you build trust? Listening was number one. It was number one. And that's how you do it, right?
It's so true. It's so true. And that just reminded me of kind of a funny little story I have
Yeah.
too about one of my clients is I was meeting with them prior to their engagement survey that I was going to help them facilitate and also a
Yeah.
round of focus groups. And the leaders, the executives they were kind of pumping themselves up. They're like, we're worried because, we hear this frustration and this complaint and this criticism. And I feel like one of the leaders said, I feel like all I do is field, frustrations and
Mm.
whatnot coming up. And so I said, all right, let's see what the data says. Well, when we get their data back, they actually had a very, very high engagement score. And the highest score, like the highest driver that they had,
Mm-hmm.
was in the area of psychological safety. So employees said, I feel
Mm.
safe communicating my ideas, frustrations to leadership. So what I told them was, look, you thought oh, they hate working here, they don't like us because they're communicating these concerns, but the reality is that's actually your biggest strength, that
Oh,
they
wow.
feel comfortable doing that. And it blew their minds. They were like, we would never have guessed that
Mm.
people were as happy here as they are because they are,
Mm.
communicating up. But I'm like, no, you're doing something really
Mm.
well because they feel safe to do that. So it's just always a good story, I think, to
Yeah.
share. Like sometimes we as leaders, we have perceptions and biases, and we attribute meaning to things when really there's something completely different going on.
That's,
And employee
that's,
listening can help us discover that.
that is so good. I love that. I cannot wait for your session at the HR Southwest conference. Hey, I do want to ask you one other question before we get into some fun questions. And as attendees or, they come in, they're attending your session, you're going to give this great information. What do you typically hope that you hear from attendees after a session's over? Do you ever think, man, I hope I hear someone say this or come up and share this, or I hope I see this? Any thoughts around that as a speaker?
Oh, okay. Two. There's two things
Okay.
that to me mean I feel good about how the session went.
Okay.
One is that I want people to say, this stimulated my thinking for what's going to work in my organization. Because I
Mm,
think a lot of times for as a speaker, it's so easy to come in and just do like, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that. And sometimes that's helpful. But
mm,
I have found that the best feedback I get as a speaker is when people say, no, she asked the right questions about my our goals, about what's unique in our organization.
mm,
She got us thinking about the nuance and what differentiates us so that we can create, a plan or action that is going to work for us,
mm,
right? So that's the big thing I think is I don't want people to ever feel like this is a cookie cutter canned kind of thing. That's very important to me. The other thing is I'm a teacher, I'm a facilitator, and so what I want is for people to feel like they've had an opportunity to engage with one another, that there's some peer
mm.
learning. So it's funny because sometimes I'll get feedback from conferences, where I present, and people will say something like, oh my goodness, this was one of my favorite sessions because I got to talk with other leaders. So I do a lot of like little breakout things. And I think,
Yeah.
isn't that so funny? Because that's actually not about me. I mean, I facilitated that. I had to like set that up.
Right.
But really what HR and people and really any professional, like you
Mm,
go to a conference and what you really want is you want to learn something,
mm,
you want to be stimulated, you want to get energy from that, and you want to connect
mm,
and learn from other people. So I'm very big about asking, hey, what's working well in your organization? What are you doing with respect to this? What hasn't worked?
mm,
And that's when people get super pumped is like, oh, that sounds like our problem. That sounds like us. So those are the two things is that it's not it's very people feel like it's individualized to them or it's framed in a way that allows for
mm,
that, but also that they get to learn from one another and swap ideas in
mm.
my sessions. That's a big deal for
I
me.
love that. I always talk about people want, yes, they want those two things when they go to a conference. They want an idea and they want a connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, and to be able to connect and you facilitating that, I could see how that would really, I love how you frame that though. You said it stimulated my thinking for my organization. It reminds me of my book, Find Your Lane. There's so many different ways to have success, but you have to find what works for you. And you're talking about, I love this. We could talk all day long on this. I love that. We're going to go to it's time to accelerate. I'm going to ask you some
Mhm.
fun questions. I want the audience to get to know who LeAnne is. Favorite speaking venue or city? Do you have one? Like you
Okay. It just happened just a few
okay.
weeks ago.
Okay.
Okay. So this is so funny. I have had the honor of presenting at a lot of really cool places.
Okay.
And there's some of that are, I just walk in and I think, whoa, I'm like not sophisticated enough to be in this room, kind of a thing. But highlight of my year of my maybe speaking career is I got very recently to go to the brand new Texas Tech football facility, which
Oh,
if you're not familiar with the college landscape, you're like, what? What are you talking about?
yeah.
I am telling you, I was a Tech
Mm,
fan.
mm.
What that was super cool, but this is the most incredible facility that I've ever walked
Love
through. I
that.
mean, everywhere I looked, I was just there was like just surprises and wow, and what is that? And I got to present in one of the team like film rooms.
Mm.
And Bruce, I'm telling you, it is the largest screen I have ever presented in front of in my life. We had to in the middle, true story, in the
That
middle
is
of it, we had to have a tech guy kind of try to adjust the light on because the screen was so bright and everybody was like, "Oh my gosh." Was so small snag in the presentation, but I didn't care because it
yeah.
was amazing. So that's
Oh,
my favorite venue
that is so
that I've ever.
fun.
I just couldn't believe it. I was
That
like,
is so fun. Oh, I
"This is
love
amazing."
that. I love, love, love that. Okay. What's something you've always wanted to learn? I mean, you're a learner.
That's a great question. I think, I have always struggled with a lot of, this sounds strange, but I've always struggled with like creative, innovative thinking.
Mm,
And part of that is because I think my natural talents are more in like organization, structure, systems, processes. It's a
mm.
lot of what I'm talking about, at HR Southwest. So it makes sense that I might struggle here, but I think, I always wanted to learn, and I always feel like that's where I sense my biggest need for learning is in those areas of creative, anticipatory thinking, strategic thinking. I have to work really hard. It takes a lot of energy for me to do that. It doesn't come
Mm,
as naturally. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind
mm,
is like, I want to learn from the most creative people. And
mm,
I
mm.
surround myself with a lot of creative people because that's an area where I struggle.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that. Okay, something people may not know about you, LeAnne.
Well, some people may know this because I do
Okay.
talk about it sometimes, but it's kind of a fun fact is I have two pet prairie dogs at
Oh,
home. And
prairie dogs.
yeah, it's funny because sometimes we'll read that in my bio, but I've
Uh,
learned that I have to be careful regionally with that because
uh,
I was presenting to an audience in California and they said, and she has two pet prairie dogs, and everybody was like, "What's a prairie dog?" We have no idea what
oh,
that is. And so in the middle of it, we're like, we have to Google this. But I do have two pet prairie dogs at
yeah,
home.
I love that.
And then maybe the only other thing I would say that people may not know about me that's kind of fun and quirky is like I was born on Christmas Day. I came home
Mm.
from the hospital in a stocking. And
Oh,
okay, check this out. You're a speaker, so you're gonna love this.
sure.
So I was born at Hendrick in a hospital in Abilene, Texas,
Okay.
and it was during a blizzard. Like my mom had to come to the hospital a couple of days before she went into labor because there was this huge blizzard coming. So I was born Christmas morning. They put me on the news that night. My mom was like, they were all up in my face. It wasn't great. But they put me in like a stocking and I came home in a stocking. So I have some pictures of that. I have pictures of my dad who he took in the TV screen in the corner of the hospital room. And of course
Hmm.
it's like early 80s wallpaper. So one of my clients now is Hendrick Health in Abilene. And so what's so cool about that is anytime I get to present to an audience in Abilene, I get to pull up this
Oh, that's
picture of
great.
me born in this hospital. And the funny thing is, there have been a few times where I presented to groups and someone's come up and said, like, I worked here then, and
Oh
I just think
no.
that's so cool. It's like over 40 years ago.
That is so great.
And anyway, so
I
that's
love
maybe a cool thing
that. A
about me too.
Christmas baby. I'll
Mhm.
remember that forever. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, here's my final question. LeAnne Lagasse, 10 years older, is around the corner and she's knocking at your door. And you're going to go answer that door. What's she going to say to you?
I think that 10 future Leanne would
Hmm.
tell me that I maybe I should have been more open to taking bigger risks
Mm.
because I told you I'm a rule follower.
Mm.
I'm a like not all the time, but like kind of a play it safe,
Mm.
default to play it safe. And I have learned over time that some of the most beautiful things that have happened in my life have happened on the heels of really big risks that I took. So I'm actually right in the middle of a pretty big risk for me. I have written a book that is going to come out in October, and it is terrifying and super exciting. And I know but I think 10 years from now, Leanne would say, like, you continue to need to know risk is where the greatest reward is for you. And that's a lesson I try to remind myself of all the time.
I love that. We're going to have another show after your book comes out, Leanne. This has been so good. I cannot wait to see you at the HR Southwest conference. I'll be calling you author, Leanne, by then, hopefully.
Wild.
And I'm so excited for you. This is so good. And for those listening, be sure and register for the HR Southwest conference. It's coming October the 12th through the 14th in Fort Worth. Leanne's going to be talking about mastering stay interviews and focus groups. And this is going to be the event you want to attend. So, Leanne, I appreciate you coming on the show and sharing perspective. Okay, for those who heard this conversation or they're watching on YouTube and they're like, I want to follow Leanne, I want to learn more from Leanne, how's the best way for them to connect?
Yes, and I would love that. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So
Mm-hmm.
LeAnne Lagasse,
Mm-hmm.
you can find me there, and also leannelagasse.com. just to learn a little bit about what I do. But LinkedIn is probably like the best place, and I would love
Mm.
to connect. And yeah, I love LinkedIn. I
I
love
love it.
LinkedIn.
I love it. And go to hrsouthwest.com, register for the conference, and we will both see you in October. Be sure and come up to us. And if you connect with LeAnne before then, be sure and let her know you heard her conversation on life in the leadership lane. That makes that connection so much deeper and quicker and richer. And let her know maybe something that she shared that impacted you. And so I cannot wait to see you and wish you continued success. And I appreciate you coming on the show today, LeAnne, and I appreciate your friendship. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. It was great to be here. I'm excited to see you in October.
Awesome. Okay, I'll talk to you later.